Hi friends, I hope you're all doing well. I'm doing things a bit differently for this video. Before we get into the collaging section, I want to talk briefly about my process on deciding on the composition and design. Ever so often I review my artwork to see its progress. Recently I did this with the Cruciform composition collages I've created over the past few years. You're viewing these collages to see what I did during my review. I like to ask myself a few questions when I do this review. Do I still like these collages? Is there anything I would do differently? Has my style changed? Do I want my style to change? What style do I want to try that isn't represented in these collages? For this collage, I want to change my usual style and create a cruciform composition collage in a style similar to this diagonal collage. This is one of my favorite collages that I created in my last video where I used leftover scraps. The things that I liked about it are the many cut shapes, the muted color palette, the high contrast with very little mid-tone value. So let's get started. These dark value papers will be for the ground layer. There's green, brown, gray, and black. Referring back to my previous cruciform collages, there are only 3 that had dark value papers in this position. This large selection of paper are options for the cruciform shape. I'm leaning towards using mostly light values. I'm loosely marking the shape of the cruciform with a pencil. This isn't a necessary step, but it's one that I do occasionally. If you're new to creating this type of composition, it's a helpful guide for the placement of the papers. This collage will have a slightly off-center design. I suggest working on the ground layer first. You can use this layer as another guide when creating the cruciform shape. My plan for this layer is to group similar color papers in each section. I think it would be less busy looking and distracting than mixing all 4 color groups together. I want this layer to be interesting looking, but I want the focus kept on the cruciform shape. I'm starting by gluing the green paper in the upper left section, cutting each element into different sizes and shapes. This will help with making this layer visually pleasing. By the way, I'm using Mod Podge to glue the paper to the substrate. I'm doing this step off camera to save time. Once this area is finished, then I'll move on to the other sections. I like completing each section before moving on to the next one. I do give myself some leeway to go back and add a piece here and there if necessary. I also want to mention that I'm not overly concerned about how the edge of each color section looks. I'm more concerned about having enough paper along the edge. This will help when I'm starting to create the cruciform shape. I want enough paper underneath it so I have the freedom to place the paper elements for the cruciform anywhere I want. I'm creating an uneven edge for the cruciform, so I want enough paper underneath each section. I don't have anything else to say at this point, so I'll add music and come back during the construction of the cruciform shape. I trimmed the edges so I have a better visual of how the first layer looks. Also, it helps when creating the cruciform shape to know how much space I have to work within. As I mentioned, the cruciform shape will be mostly light value. I want this collage to have a high contrast. It's a challenge for me since I typically use a lot of mid-tone values in my art. This is something that I would like to change. I started with the aqua and beige papers because I thought both leaned more mid-tone value than light. I wanted to make sure there was some of this value represented before adding the light value papers. I chose to place aqua along the edge of the brown section and beige along the edge of the green section for contrast. If I did the reverse, then it'd look too color coordinated, and that's not what I want. Also, I put one of each color element in place first, so I had a starting point for these two sections. I will build both of these edges before moving on to the other sections. Like the ground layer, I want the cruciform to have many different pattern papers that are cut in different shapes and on the smaller size. This will help to keep the collage cohesive. Also, I want the cruciform to have uneven edges. I'm overlapping the paper elements on top of the 4 sections instead of gluing right up to the edges. This will help to create a visually pleasing design. I thought the design would be unbalanced if the aqua papers were only placed along the edge of the brown paper section. To balance the design, I added aqua papers along the edge of the black paper section as well. I had this number paper for quite a while, but wasn't sure how to use it in a collage. I think it works well in this one. Depending how I cut the elements, the numbers can be seen as a shape rather than a recognizable symbol. Also, this paper has light mid-tone values, so it fits perfectly for the elements in the cruciform. I wasn't sure if this sliver of the number paper would look good in this area, so I placed it unglued while I worked on the other sections. I tried it on top of other areas before deciding it wasn't needed. The shape was too different than the ones already glued in place. This collage was fun to create because it was outside my usual style. I encourage you to try to do this, even if you decide it's not one that fits into your art practice. You may find certain elements that can be included. Will I change my design style to only create in this way? Probably not, but I will include elements of it in my art practice. Here's the grayscale version. It shows a very minimal amount of mid-tone value elements. I hope you learned something from this video and that it was enjoyable to watch. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.